What's up, everyone? Today is the day. I'm finally going to paint the track. So, how do you paint a huge rubber track? The problem is that it's a pretty uncommon thing amongst armor models, so not many people have done this. That means you cannot check many models and see what works and what doesn't. So we need to use the real world as a source of inspiration. So what does this track look like? Well, to me it looks like a huge tractor tire, and I think there are plenty of those on the interwebs. So I'm gonna open Google and would you look at that? There's so much inspiration in just the first 2 rows of results. This photo looks very good. This is gonna be my main source of reference. This is also cool. I will use this later when I'm replicating some mud and dust. And there are much more photos showing different effects and textures. Although the lower you go, the more it becomes about DIY garden projects and less about actual reference material. So let's get back to the workbench. Surprisingly, I will once again use my 6K dark brown as the base color because of its blackish brown tone, but I'm gonna make it much lighter with light gray. This will take a few attempts until I have the right color. I'm using live color paints once again because I'm going to apply them by brush and airbrush. And they dry to a dead flat finish, like they actually absorb light. That's how flat they are. This looks pretty good, so let's get to work. I'll start by painting the side walls with brush, because I absolutely hate masking. This step is very easy, although you'll need 2 layers of paint to fully cover the surface, just like when I was brush painting the camouflage. Then I took a slightly larger brush and painted the outside edges of the track. You can tell this is a very sloppy job, but it's okay. The paint will dry to a smooth finish nonetheless. And no, I'm not going to paint the entire track with brush. So let's pour some of that paint into the airbrush and fire up the compressor. Now I'm simply airbrushing the remaining area. The brush painted edges make this task much easier, because I'm not risking any overspray that might land on the tank. And you might just witness the most drastic change in this model's appearance since, like, opening the box. This could already pass as a good base for earth effects, but I want to play with the surface a little bit more. So I will cover the entire track with heavy chipping fluid. 2 fine layers will be enough. And I don't worry about overspray, because I can just remove the excess chipping fluid with water. This time I'm mixing a lighter grey-brown from Tamiya paints. The main paint is XF19 Sky Grey, and the brown is my own mixture, but it's almost identical to XF52 Flat Earth. I used it because my Flat Earth had dried up. And I'm airbrushing it around the thread pattern, although I'm still covering most of the surface, but I mainly focus the paint around the threads. As you might know, this paint layer should be quite thin, so it will be easy to chip. Airbrushing the sidewalls requires more careful approach, but it's still quite easy. And now for the chipping. I'm just lightly tapping the surface to lift the paint with water and carefully chip it away. My main focus here is to leave the paint around the thread pattern and keep the flat spots darker. This creates the textured random effect seen in that reference photo from Google. And I'm also removing the paint from the threads, so they will stand out nicely. Although some paint will remain here and there, it will make them look more interesting. Also, don't forget the sidewall. I'm just tapping the brush to create at least some texture. It's not that important because it's a small surface. So now we have more stuff going on the track, but it's way too bright. Therefore, it's time to make it darker and add more tones using oil paints. I was going to use these paints, but I quickly learned that black-brown won't look good. It was creating a sort of dark rust effect on the track, so I swapped it for pure black. The process is quite straightforward. I painted the black on the outside, light gray towards the center, and added a few dots of brown for good measure. Then I blended them with small amount of enamel thinner. Note how I'm working in small segments, just a few rows at a time. That's so the oils won't get enough time to start drying and potentially stick to the flat surface, which would leave a faint outline of the oil dot. And we really don't want that. So this is just mostly about reducing the contrast between the two gray colors and adding more tones at the same time. Again, very easy and fun process. Now I created more contrast between the threads by painting light gray around them and blending it. Note how I'm adding it only from one direction, which again creates a more interesting effect, almost like a light gradient. And then I applied a generous wash mixed from black paint over the entire track to make it darker, unify some of the effects and bring out the texture I created in the first episode. I think this step might be one of the most important when painting old rubber surfaces. These random heavy spots of light gray are often present on sheets of old rubber like conveyor belts, but I found them on the tractor tires as well. They're even visible in that reference photo I'm using. I don't know what they are, but they look nice. I'm using the Tamiya mixture I used previously for the light grey tone. And once again I'm tying everything together with another layer of black wash. This time I'm concentrating it on the brush painted spots to sort of, to blend them into the surface. And that makes the track finished and ready for some weathering. Whew. Remember when I said I was very nervous about this one? That's because I've never done anything like this. If we don't count this Jackson from Yugoslavia with rubber armor. But luckily I became confident in what I was doing right after I finished chipping the lighter gray. After that, it was actually pretty easy. Well, turns out it was all pretty easy. The hardest part was, as is often the case, studying the real-world references and trying to figure out how to replicate what I'm seeing. Well, I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, right? But I think it's quite passable. Keep in mind that some of the effects seen in the real-life photos will be added later with Earth effects. And speaking of that, I'm now getting quite nervous about the weathering. So the next episode will be about earth tones. I'm not sure if it will be just about dust, or I'll be able to cramp in the mud as well. It will depend on how much time I will spend with each step. So yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching and I'll see you mates in the next one.